On a Thursday morning, we always check in with our friends at the Lakeville Journal, tricornernews.com, with the stories that they are following, and we should have both Cynthia and Janet on the line with us. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
All right, we'll go right to the front page, and when I look at this issue of the Journal, and when I see the big front page story and the picture of Steve Blass and the memory of Ed Kirby. We also lost, which we'll talk about a few minutes ahead of time, two other stalwarts community members passed away, and we'll get to that a little later on. But the big story is that ball field is now named Ed Kirby Field, and those improvements and more are on the way.
And actually, as you look at the front page, a nice tribute to Steve Blass, who is one of baseball's greats and continues to be so dedicated to his Northwest Corner community. He grew up in Falls Village. He's back here all the time. They named the Little League field in North Canaan after him. And in Patrick's article about him, which we did put a byline on, he says, I've been accused of sometimes going to McDonald's and getting a quarter pounder and just sitting here in the bleachers and staring at the Steve Blass field. It makes me so happy, and what a beautiful thing. So he came out on for the Friday dedication of the baseball field at Housatonic Valley Regional High School. It's surprising in a way that it hadn't already been dedicated to Ed Kirby, because he was so much an important part of the history of outstanding baseball at Housatonic. But the field was named for Ed in a nice ceremony. Steve Blass spoke for that, and then he stayed for the Little League game that was over the weekend. It was the Red Sox versus the Pirates, and of course Steve Blass, a famous Pittsburgh Pirate, but it was this time, I think, the Tri-County.
Are you there? No, we lost your volume there, Cynthia. We'll try there you go. There you go.
Talking about Steve Blass throwing out the first pitch for the Little League team that is run by his cousin Nicky Blass. So, and spending a lot of time joking with the kids and signing their shirts and their baseball bats and their gloves, etc. So, really a lovely weekend out with Steve Blass.
All right, and of course you have the full story now on the swimmer's body, which was finally recovered from the Housatonic River.
Right, a very sad story about a person who actually lived right at that section of the river. We knew he was local. I didn't realize that he lived right on Dublin Road, which is just above the falls, and had been out with a couple of friends apparently, and took off on a rope swing and went under the surface and didn't come back up. It's very tricky, that water in there, much more tricky than it looks, and we continue to warn people, although really it's mostly people from out of town who come to unhappy situations there, but a local person too. Reminder to everybody: it's not that safe in that river. Please don't swim there.
Yep. We'll move on to another story on the front page by Deb Alexanis, which is, I think everybody would love to be able to do this. The key to avoiding tick bites.
Yes, and this winter, everybody was out hiking and walking and skiing and out in nature all the time. And I'm not a huge outdoor person because I can get poison ivy just being in the same half-mile vicinity of it, and ticks find me every single time. But winter was much easier. Summer is going to be more difficult for anybody who's in the least bit attractive to ticks. It's apparently a really record-breaking tick year this year, even though I felt like it was a pretty cold winter, but I guess it was short enough that it didn't really damage the tick population. So we started last week with an article about the high number of ticks. This week, Deb writes about ways to avoid them, but it's pretty much stuff that you know, which is, you got to wear those light-colored clothing, you got to really bathe heavily, shampoo when you come back in after being outdoors. And Patrick Sullivan recommends permethrin. He's out in the woods all the time, fishing and clomping around, and says that's worked very well for him, is spraying his clothing with permethrin before he goes out.
All right, and another important story, which is right on the front page and goes on, it's not only in the Lakeville Journal, but it's also in the Millerton News. We mentioned on the air about the Memorial Day parades and the activities, but that's a very easy thing to miss. What you have done and do every year, you have a full list of all the Memorial Day activities in our Tri-Corner area right here in Connecticut and New York in the paper, both Lakeville Journal and Millerton News this week.
Janet kept saying to me, so everybody's having a parade. I was like, no, nobody's having a parade. And then we put the list together, and I was like, oh, yeah, everybody's having a parade. It's not quite a normal Memorial Day. See, actually, Salisbury, which is one of the biggest parades, is not having a parade. There may be more going on than has been officially announced, but I think that they're concerned. People do kind of come to Salisbury. It's a very magnetic town center, and it really is one of the most iconic holiday parades, observance parades. So this year, Salisbury is just having a service at 7 a.m. at Town Hall. I don't know if anything else is going to grow up organically in town that day, but Kent is having a parade. Canaan is having the honor guard will be going from cemetery to cemetery in Falls Village, North Canaan, so I'll be off doing that. And then, of course, the 11 a.m. ceremony at the Doughboy, small ceremony at Falls Village. Cornwall is going to be having a small parade and the usual honor roll of the veterans with Dave Cadwell on the green. Gordon Ridgway, the first selectman, will be the speaker. I think there's awards being given to notable women in town, but that's going to be on Zoom. So I think this year all of the organizers of these events would be happy if you would wear a mask, socially distance, and when it's possible to watch on Zoom instead of coming out.
And Sharon is having their Memorial Day parade, too. So you folks from Salisbury can go to the Salisbury thing and then quickly either go to North Canaan or go to Falls Village or go to Sharon.
Or Millerton, the New York State is having.
That's right. Millerton is having them, and Amenia is having it.
Pine Plains.
So there are plenty of chances for you to observe Memorial Day. Hey, there's a new director of the Northwest Hills Council of Government. Robert Phillips has been named that.
I think the COG is more interesting than I think people realize it is, and we've had a couple of funny letters this year with people sort of feeling anxiety about the fact that they're making these plans for the region. So this is a regional planning group, and it is the first selectman from 21 towns. It used to be 9 towns. Then they merged the 2 regional organizations together. But if you've been to their meetings, it's actually very useful, not just to give the first selectman a chance to kind of vent about frustration they feel with state government, but also there's a complicated series of towns taking turns applying for government grants, and the COG helps them with applying for those grants, and it's an opportunity for the selectmen to say, we're having this problem in our town, what have you all done to help solve it? And it's a good chance for them to share ideas. So the COG is very important. They meet once a month in Goshen. Rick Lynn has been the head of it, a very quiet, steady, strong leader for that group, and he's just retired. And they found a new person who has great experience, Robert Phillips from Farmington. So that will be interesting to see how he does.
All right, Salisbury Housing Plan, it was approved by the Planning and Zoning. You've got Patrick Sullivan's story on that.
It's interesting to me how many people are commenting on this, because this has been a very divisive, very discussed issue in Salisbury. Everybody who talks about this immediately says, well, they've got a lot of restrictions on it. And I feel like people who are for the housing plan say that, and people who have concerns about it are against it. I have mentioned that there are these restrictions. So I think restrictions can be a good thing. A lot of the concerns that people had mentioned were aesthetic. A lot of concerns they had were about traffic control and parking. And so some of these conditions will address those issues. And we'll hope that we are able to build in Salisbury a really beautiful residential setting for people who are lower income or who are not able or ready yet to take on a full-time residence, which is challenging. For a lot of people, having a mortgage, having to do home maintenance is very challenging, and a great opportunity to have a residential place like this.
All right, and the budgets, once again, go forward. One approved in Kent and another one coming up in Falls Village.
And I don't know if this is a function of the fact that a lot of these meetings have been on Zoom, but people have been very active in the budget debates, and a lot of it has been about emergency support. So discussion in Kent, discussion in Falls Village, which is great. That's what the towns want. And now they are moving on to, Falls Village is moving on to its town meeting, and Kent has approved its budget.
A couple of things that we found out here a day or so ago about our good friend and contributor John Neufeld passing away, but I was once again double shocked this morning to take a look and see that you've got the notice about Reverend Tabor.
Wonderful man, really one of the loveliest people I've ever met, and had been ill for quite some time and had been failing for quite some time. So he died on Monday, and the services this weekend at the Congregational Church, where he was the reverend for the pastor for so long, and I think that's going to be a very, very packed service.
I never saw him without a smile on his face, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
No matter what. Yeah.
He was just a profoundly interesting, kind, caring person.
And John Neufeld, an acclaimed author, award-winning author, president of the Salisbury Rotary Club. John, like I said, participated with us for about 10 years doing some programming. And also he won that big award from the National Rotary Club as well.
Janet, do you want to talk about John at all?
Well, he was a wonderful guy. What a sense of humor, as well as a sense of community, and always thinking about how to make things better in his community, whatever that community was. And so he was so full of ideas at Rotary to come up with ways to really benefit the community, including having that Election Day breakfast free for the community after voting at presidential elections, which was really so much fun. I was in the kitchen cooking for those, and it was an idea that, when implemented, just was so community building. So, and so many other things. Do read through his amazing obituary describing his life.
Amazing man, a true Renaissance man.
Right.
We move on to your opinion and editorial pages. Your editorial, One Unifying Moment, Remembering the Fallen and Welcoming Summertime.
Right. Memorial Day weekend coming up, and what a difference from last year at this time, when COVID-19 had taken its grip to the fullest, and we were all hunkering down and not able to have any of the events. So, of course, veterans went out and did the ceremonies at the cemeteries, but that was not anything that, the general public would have taken part in last year. This year, so different. Things are open much more, many more of us vaccinated, many more of us comfortable going out, even if it is wearing masks outdoors. These things can happen, and we're so grateful that there are those who organize the events around Memorial Day. Veterans and citizens alike were able to pull it together for this year in some of the towns, because it's not easy to do it after a year has gone by when things haven't happened, things fall away. It's not a simple thing to do. So just full gratitude for that, and I hope that those who are new to their communities will take part in some aspect of the commemorations for Memorial Day.
And, of course, we lose our veterans at an amazing rate. Andy Ossoff is finally retired, and in Kent, he will not be leading the parades anymore, but they found somebody to come in there. Lots of your letters go from a letter of help and thanks, and then, of course, all over the place. So once again, the letters continue to come in.
Yeah, and you're right, they're fascinating. And don't miss Jane Strong's Reflections on Memorial Day. She runs the Equus Effect in Sharon and sent that photograph of one of her beloved horses sniffing a poppy. So, evocative of what that work does and how it affects people. So do read her letter, and yeah, we have a letter about McCarthyism now and then, how history matters in Salisbury. Michael Kaler is telling us to just accept that we can be happy. And Tara Kennedy on gratitude after an automobile accident.
Looking back at you, turning back the pages, every year when it comes time for graduation time at Housatonic Valley Regional High School, I remember back to my graduating year in 1971. That happens to be the year that the Interlaken burned down, and looking at grand old historic inn, the Interlaken was rebuilt into the more modern structure, but that happened 50 years ago.
Right. That old building was such an iconic thing, and it's interesting you mentioned you remember it, and Norma Bosworth, who writes that column, wanted us to note that if you go to the ScovilleLibrary.org, she found photographs of that the old original Interlaken Inn before it burned, that same week. And so if you want to see what it looked like, you can go find that file at ScovilleLibrary.org.
The closest thing that can come to it that comes to my mind is the Red Lion Inn, but even that was not anywhere near like the size of the grandeur of the Interlaken before it burned down. But that's it's just one of those things that always sticks with me year after year after year.
Yeah, and it is so hard to picture for those of us who didn't know it at that time. But there was a big old inn like that in Armenia. There were inns like that in these towns. That
Sharon had a beautiful big inn back then at the time. But
yeah.
All right, we'll go to the different viewpoints. Should Trump be banned from Facebook and Twitter? Why can't we conquer the big C? And alternative sustainable energy fuel cells.
Fuel cells, and this directly relates to Connecticut right now. There's a bill going through the legislature in support of the fuel cell manufacturers. So do read this and keep an eye on that bill. Lonnie Carter writes about cancer, and it's something that affects everyone, every family, and it's very personal for him. So do give that a read, and if anyone has anything they'd like to share too, by all means. Dick Ollis writes about Donald Trump being banned on Facebook and Twitter, and he comes at it from the First Amendment point of view, and I'll let you read it to see how he comes out, but he certainly takes the approach of Oliver Wendell Holmes, the great American jurist, who the quote is, "Not freedom for the thought of those who agree with us, but freedom for the thought that we hate."
See, when it comes to Donald Trump on Twitter and Facebook, I say much ado about nothing because people get banned on Facebook and Twitter all the time.
All the time,
Repeat offenders get banned permanently. So, I mean, it's an interesting story, and it's an interesting thing that's going on. But if you really dig down deep into it, I'm sure people know they have friends that have been banned from Facebook and Twitter. So it's a
I'm
time.
sure only they notice, though, if their friends are banned. If former president is banned, Dick makes a pretty interesting argument. I will stay on the fence about that myself, but Dick is pretty persuasive.
It's an interesting situation where social media has to be caught up with like newspapers and radio stations are with laws. But anyway,
you used to only hear the word ban in South Africa many years ago when people were banned.
Right.
All right, let's go on. Let's not ban Compass. Let's go on to Compass because we are getting back into a time where lots of things are going on. Cynthia.
And I have to say, we had a pretty, in so many ways, we were very sheltered from COVID up here in the Northwest corner, and there continued to be a lot of cultural activities during the last year. A lot of it was on Zoom, and things are beginning to open up now again to the public, sort of in a half and half way. But a show at Argosy Art. There's not going to be an opening, but you can come see them in person. Just give Judith Singelis a call. Beautiful, very in this hot weather. Nice cooling images of the California coast, very stormy and beautiful. PS21 up in Chatham, which is nearby. It's one of those funny things where I was in Hudson yesterday with Carol Sadlin from the Movie House, and it was so much fun. And she, of course, is a Connecticut person who's very comfortable going into the Hudson Valley, but so many of us people in Litchfield County, it just doesn't occur to us to go over the line. There's a lot of cool stuff going on there, a lot of interesting things at PS21, dance and theater and art. Coming up on June 3rd at the Hotchkiss Library of Sharon, Brian Ross, incredible award-winning investigative journalist and TV news anchor, will be interviewing Barry Meyer, author and award-winning journalist. Brian has been very generous with organizations in Sharon with sharing his time and his expertise. And Leila Hawken had written a few weeks ago an article about a talk sponsored by the Eric Sloan Museum, which is a state museum in Kent, dedicated to the author and painter Eric Sloan, who does those incredible books of hand-drawn illustrations of old tools. So a nice talk on the Norman Rockwell Museum by Stephanie Plunkett, who's a Sharon resident and is the curator at the Norman Rockwell Museum, comparing the important work of two very American artists, but also a reminder that the Antique Machinery Association grounds in Kent are open I think you have to go on the website and check, but on the grounds there is the Eric Sloan Museum.
And also the Berkshire Museum this weekend will start to open up once again. You can go to their website to find out they're still going to have some restrictions for people because a lot of children go to that museum. But we would be remiss. I'm glad you mentioned Carol Sadlon. The movie house is going to be opening up on Memorial Day weekend, and then they'll shut down for a day or two and then open back up. But that is to me, a real huge thing that the movie house is reopening.
Right, and that's
huge.
a front page story in the Millerton News, and they're talking about the elevator being installed as well.
Yeah.
So Carol and I stopped by and chatted with David Maltby, who is the new owner, with his partner Chelsea Altman. And the elevator, once you see it in there, you're like, well, of course, it seems so obvious. They just put it in such a logical spot there. But the upstairs is still under renovation. They've got a lot of exciting plans up there. It looks very different. The downstairs looks really spiffed up. They're putting in new carpet. They're racing toward the opening on Memorial Day weekend with Dream Horse and A Quiet Place 2. And I think that people will forgive them if there are a couple things that aren't completely perfect, but I think they're trying as hard as they can. But one thing people need to know is that the seats are by reservation only right now because of COVID. So you can get your seat when you show up at the door, but if you care about where you sit in the theater, you should go online and order your ticket ahead of time.
That's right, because unlike Connecticut, which is pretty much wide open now, in New York, 33% capacity is what they're at. But, for the movie house to reopen is like, I'll be honest with you, when in Canaan, the railroad depot got fixed up and opened again, the movie house really was a driving factor in where Millerton is today. And Carol and Bob did such a great job over the years, and now it's back, and that makes Millerton complete again.
Mm-hmm. It really does feel that way. It's great.
Yeah.
So, this is a weekend to look forward to. I'll also mention we have Tri-Corner Real Estate in the paper this week, so don't miss that. There's a lot going on in real estate in the tri-state region.
Pretty soon there won't be any houses to put in real estate
I know.
region. We'll have to do a building real estate section. Well, I want you guys to have a great holiday weekend. I know the holiday weekend, like us here, brings us out to work at lots of different things, and I know you have to cover lots of different things, but have a good weekend.
You too. Thank you so much.
What a difference from last year. Hey?
Yeah, it's just great.
Right.
So we will enjoy every single event and take inspiration from them.
All right. Take care, guys.
You too.
You too. Bye-bye.
The Lakeville Journal is available, of course, at tricornernews.com, tricornernews.com, on newsstands throughout the region, and also by a home delivery as well.